A forgotten hearth holds the last embers of sleeping stories. Elara, a young storyteller, stands in the Hall of Echoes, a place where ancient myths are said to stir with just a single spark. She hopes to rekindle the realm's fading magic and prove she is worthy of this sacred task. With a steady hand, she coaxes a flame to life in the ancient hearth. The gentle crackle of the fire awakens a soft, shimmering light, and a low, melodic hum fills the air, a clear sign that slumbering tales are beginning to wake. By the end of our journey, you will discover the cozy, forgotten realms these stories call home, a perfect escape for a peaceful night. I wonder where you are listening from right now and what the local time is for you. What kind of story do you hope a quiet place like this might tell first? A smooth, river-worn stone felt cool in Elara's palm as she drew it from her satchel. This was no ordinary rock, but a listening stone meant to invite a story from the silence. She placed it gently upon the hearth's worn mantle, a simple gesture that completed an age-old ritual. For a breath, nothing happened. Then, a faint, milky light began to pulse from the stone's core, and the melodic hum in the air tightened, coalescing into a soft, whispering voice. It spoke of a pattern of stars that had vanished from the sky, a constellation whose story had been lost. A sharp pang of doubt tightened in Elara's chest. Was she, a mere novice, truly the right person to give voice to such an ancient memory? Her own uncertainty felt like a wall, but she closed her eyes, pushing her fears aside, and made a choice to simply listen, opening her heart as a vessel for the tale. As she did, a subtle chill descended upon the hall, and the firelight seemed to pull inward, causing shadows to sway and stretch at the very edges of the room. The story's presence was not threatening, but it was immense, a gentle power that demanded respect. The whisper grew clearer now, no longer just a sound, but a beckoning, pulling her attention toward the threshold of the first forgotten realm. The whisper led her toward a large, forgotten loom, shrouded in dust. Its frame was ancient, but its silvery threads seemed to wait, holding their breath. Elara reached out, her fingers lightly tracing the cool, taut strings. At her touch, the loom hummed, and the threads began to move of their own accord, weaving a tapestry in the air before her. It showed a night sky unlike any she had ever seen, where stars were not merely points of light, but intricate patterns woven from pure starlight and the fabric of dreams themselves. Each shimmering thread told part of their story. Then, a sharp ping echoed in the silence. A single thread, strained beyond its limits, snapped. The image of a brilliant blue star flickered and began to fade, threatening to pull the entire celestial scene into loose, unraveled threads. Without a second thought, Elara pulled a long strand of her own hair, its color like pale moonlight. She carefully tied it to the broken ends, her small sacrifice binding the story back together. The tapestry flared with a soft, grateful light, the woven stars pulsing gently as if with a steady heartbeat. Yet as the image steadied, a cold draft slipped through the hall, carrying a scent of old frost. The completed tapestry now glowed with a persistent, warm light, and its radiance pooled on the stone floor, pointing like a silent finger toward an old, wooden door she had not noticed before. The tarnished brass handle felt cool and smooth beneath her fingers. Elara turned it, and the door carved with flowering vines swung inward without even a whisper. Beyond it lay a garden bathed in a gentle, perpetual moonlight, where every blossom and leaf emitted its own soft, internal glow. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and sweet nectar. She took a single step forward, but a curtain of thorny vines descended before her, blocking the path with a quiet, swift rustle. The thorns were not aggressive, but they were firm, a living barrier questioning her right to enter. A memory surfaced in her mind, a lullaby her grandmother had sung, its words a gentle promise of peace and deep respect for all living things. Elara began to hum the old melody, her voice a soft thread in the quiet air. As the tune wove through the garden, the sharp thorns slowly retracted, curling back into themselves, and the glowing flowers seemed to pulse, their light growing warmer and brighter in response. Yet she now felt a new presence, a watchful silence from the deep shadows between the ancient trees. The garden's guardian was aware of her, observing her every move. In answer, a path unfurled at her feet, woven from the fallen petals of the glowing flowers, illuminating a route that led toward the very heart of this mysterious, sleeping realm. The glowing path of petals led her to the garden's very heart, where a great stone beast lay in deep slumber. Its form was like that of a sleeping lion, carved from ancient, smooth rock, and moss clung gently to its shoulders. As Elara drew near, the stone eyelids fluttered and then opened, revealing vast, luminous eyes the color of polished moonstones. A low, gravelly voice, like the sound of shifting continents, rumbled through the quiet air. It spoke a riddle, what is softer than silence but louder than a storm. Elara's mind raced, a whisper she offered, the garden's light flickered, a thought she tried again. The light dimmed further, the blossoms around her seeming to withdraw their gentle glow. A chill of failure touched her spine. If she could not answer, the path would close, and this realm would slip back into forgotten sleep. She closed her eyes, shutting out the intimidating presence, and instead listened inward. She remembered the hall of echoes, the gentle hum of the awakened hearth, the potential held in a single, unspoken tale. Her own voice was quiet, but sure when she finally answered, a story waiting to be heard. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, the great beast gave a slow, deep nod. A network of fine cracks appeared across its stone form, and from within them spilled a warm, golden light that banished the lingering chill. You remember the truth, the guardian rumbled, its voice now holding a note of approval. It lowered its head, and a single luminous petal, glowing with a soft white light, drifted from its mane into her open palm. The petal was cool and weightless, and as she held it, it lifted from her hand of its own accord, floating like a tiny lantern toward the soft, bubbling music of a nearby fountain. The luminous petal drifted like a tiny moonbeam toward the fountain's gentle music. Elara followed, her steps quiet on the glowing path, until she stood before the water. It flowed not downward, but upward in a shimmering, silent cascade, defying the very nature of streams. The petal touched the liquid surface and was caught, floating perfectly in the cup of her waiting hands. Instantly, the upward flow ceased, and the water became a pane of flawless, dark glass. Her own reflection did not look back. Instead, the surface swirled with the faces of countless others, their eyes holding the weight and wonder of ages past. These were the ancient storytellers, the previous keepers of this realm, their memories preserved in the fountain's depths. A soft, mournful sigh whispered through the air as one of the reflections, the image of a woman with kind, tired eyes, began to fade too quickly, her features dissolving into mist before her story could even be sensed. A profound sense of loss, not cruel but deeply sorrowful, washed over Elara. Without thinking, she leaned closer and whispered a promise into the stillness. "I will remember you." A single tear, warm with her empathy, escaped and fell into the water. Where it landed, the fountain's basin ignited with a soft, steady blue light. The fading image of the storyteller solidified, her eyes meeting Elara's with a look of profound gratitude. A fragment of her tale, a sensation of guiding lost travelers home by starlight, flowed into Elara's mind, a precious gift rescued from oblivion. Having shared its burden, the fountain's water sighed and reversed its flow, now coursing downward in a quiet stream that carried this new, remembered story away from the stone basin and toward the dark, waiting entrance of a hidden grove. The stream led her into a grove of impossible beauty, where the trees had bark of polished silver and leaves of thin, resonant crystal. A soft breeze stirred the branches, and the leaves chimed against one another, a sound like 1,000 tiny bells. With every delicate chime, a whispered word drifted into the air, a fragment of some long-lost ballad or a half-remembered lullaby. At first, it was a gentle murmur, a pleasant scattering of syllables. But soon, more leaves chimed, and the individual whispers began to overlap, tumbling over one another in a rising, dissonant chorus. A name from one story collided with the place from another, and a line of poetry was drowned out by a child's rhyme. The beautiful sounds had become a wall of noise, each tale fighting to be heard and making it impossible to grasp any single one. Elara felt a familiar anxiety tighten in her chest, the fear of failing to understand, of letting these precious fragments scatter back into silence. She knew she could not shout over them or force them into order. Instead, she moved to the base of the largest silver tree, its trunk wide and ancient, and she sat upon the soft, mossy earth. Closing her eyes, she began to hum, not her grandmother's lullaby this time, but a simple, wordless melody. She listened to the chaotic chiming, finding its erratic rhythm, and slowly, patiently, she wove her own voice into it, matching her pitch to the clear tones of the leaves, harmonizing with the dissonance rather than fighting it. Her gentle hum became a thread of gold in a tangled silver web. One by one, the frantic whispers began to align with her melody, their edges softening, their pace slowing. The chaotic chorus resolved into a single, coherent, and deeply gentle song, a ballad of starlight on forgotten seas. As the last note hung in the air, the great tree's roots began to pulse with a soft, amber light from deep within the soil. The earth shifted slightly, and a section of the intertwined roots retracted, revealing a hidden compartment lined with velvet moss. Within it rested a single object, an old, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with a pattern of swirling constellations. Elara reached for it, her fingers brushing against the worn leather. The moment she lifted the book, it felt warm and alive in her hands. It opened of its own accord, its pages turning rapidly until they settled on an illustration, not of a place, but of a feeling, a deep, resonant quiet that seemed to pull her entire being toward the next waiting threshold. The old book felt like a living thing in her hands, its cover soft and warm. Elara carefully opened it, her fingers tracing the blank, creamy pages. They were empty, waiting. Remembering a half-forgotten instruction from her training, she leaned close and let out a soft, steady breath across the parchment. Where her warmth touched the page, ink began to bloom, spreading like delicate frost on a winter window. It formed not just words, but whole illustrations, depicting a deep, secluded valley where the very echoes were said to sleep during the sunlit hours, only to awaken and sing haunting melodies under the cover of night. As she turned the page to learn more, the parchment at the spine crinkled, a thin, white line appearing along the edge. A sharp fear pierced her heart. The story itself was so fragile, so close to being lost again. Thinking quickly, she drew the luminous petal the stone guardian had given her. She placed it gently against the threatened spine, and as its soft white light touched the paper, the fragile line sealed itself, the page reinforced by the guardian's enduring magic. The book pulsed with a new, golden warmth in her hands, and the illustrations of the valley grew impossibly vivid, the painted moonlight seeming to cast real shadows across her lap. But a sudden, cold wind whipped through the grove, rustling the crystal leaves and trying to force the pages shut. Elara held on tightly, shielding the book with her own body, and as she did, the images on the page began to shift and flow. The valley melted away, reforming into a new scene, a path winding upward through misty, windswept highlands that called to her with a silent, compelling urgency. The path from the book led upward into a landscape of soft, clinging mist. Elara climbed a gentle slope where the damp air felt like cobwebs against her skin, each step taking her further from the remembered warmth of the hearth. The mist would part for just a moment, revealing the dark, silent shapes of standing stones rising from the earth like sleeping giants, their surfaces thick with velvet moss and etched with deep, angular runes. Then the white haze would swallow them again, a disorienting silence, falling as the comforting hum from the Hall of Echoes faded into a distant, muffled memory. A quiet unease settled in her chest. She reached out, her fingers finding the cool, damp surface of the nearest stone. Carefully, she traced the grooves of one rune. A soft amber light pulsed under her touch, and the rune emitted a low, clear hum, a single, sustained note. She traced another, and then a third, each one glowing and adding its own unique pitch to the air, creating a simple, three-note chord that resonated deep within her. In response, the mist pulled back, clearing a perfect circle around her and the stone, but the melody had done more than part the fog. Just beyond the ring of light, curious shadowy shapes began to drift and circle, drawn by the sound. They were formless and silent, not threatening but intensely watchful, their presence a reminder that this highland held its own quiet mysteries. The three runes on the stone now glowed brighter, their combined melody shifting, weaving into a new, beckoning tune that seemed to pull her attention toward the sound of rushing water. Following the song, she saw it, a cave entrance almost completely hidden behind the gentle, silver veil of twin waterfalls. The twin waterfalls cascaded in a hush of silver, their sound a soothing murmur against the stones. Elara reached a hand toward the shimmering curtain, expecting a cold splash, but the water parted like liquid silk at her touch, flowing around her fingers without leaving a single drop. She stepped through the veil into a profound stillness. The cave walls were not rough stone, but were embedded with countless pale blue crystals, each one pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light, a gentle heartbeat in the dark. For a moment, She simply watched the slow, steady glow, a quiet rhythm that echoed the calm she felt. Then, without warning, the pulses began to quicken. The light flickered and stuttered, the rhythm breaking into a frantic, anxious staccato. The crystal's gentle hum rose in pitch, a sound of distress that vibrated through the soles of her feet. The cave itself was panicking, its ancient light thrown into chaos by her presence. Elara knew she could not force it to be calm. Instead, she moved to the largest crystal at the chamber's heart, a pillar of pure, cool blue. She placed her palm flat against its smooth surface, closed her eyes, and focused on the memory of its original, steady rhythm. She drew a slow, deep breath, then another, willing her own heart to beat in time with the crystal's forgotten pace. In and out, in and out. Gradually, the frantic pulsing around her began to slow, each crystal matching the tempo of the great central stone, until the entire cave was glowing in a deep, synchronized harmony. The light softened, no longer anxious but purposeful, and the crystals began to project shifting patterns onto the smooth wall before her. They were not pictures of people or places, but of vast, slow-moving continents, of forests breathing in the dark, of deep roots dreaming of the sun. These were the Earth's own dreams, stories of patience and growth written in light. One of these patterns, a swirl of interconnected lines, did not fade. It solidified, its glow intensifying into a clear, luminous map. At its center, a single, softly rounded peak was marked, a dormant volcano waiting silently under a blanket of stars. The dormant volcano rose before her, a gentle giant, sleeping under a blanket of stars. Its slopes were covered in a thick, warm moss that pulsed with a soft, golden light, and the air was filled with the deep, rhythmic sound of its breathing. Each slow, resonant snore sent puffs of warm air from its peak, carrying a comforting scent of cinnamon and old parchment. Elara stood at its base, feeling the vibration travel up through the soles of her feet, a lullaby written in the earth itself. Then the rhythm broke. The mountain's snoring faltered, catching in a shudder that ran through the entire slope. The mossy light flickered erratically, and small pebbles skittered down from above. A full awakening would be a cataclysm of noise and light, shattering the delicate peace of this realm and silencing the stories it cradled. There was no time for doubt. Elara closed her eyes, drew a steadying breath, and began to sing her grandmother's lullaby. Her voice was a soft thread, but she wove it into the mountain's own troubled rhythm, matching the cadence of its breaths, harmonizing with the deep rumble. She sang of quiet stones and patient roots, of dreams that last for centuries. Slowly, the shuddering ceased. The giant's breathing deepened, its snore returning to a steady, soothing tempo that vibrated through the very air. The mountain sighed, a long, contented exhalation of pure relief. From a fissure near its peak, a geyser of warm, glittering dust erupted, not with violence but with a gentle sigh. It fell around her like golden snow, coating her clothes and skin in a fine, shimmering layer. The magic felt like a warm blanket and a whispered promise of safety, a sleepy protection woven from the mountain's deepest dreams. As the last of the dust settled, it began to stir again, swirling at her feet into a new, glittering path that led away from the mossy slopes and toward the pale, endless sands of a starlit desert. The starlit dunes stretched before her, a sea of sand that glittered like crushed pearls under the light of twin moons. Elara walked the path of glittering dust, her feet sinking silently into the soft, cool grains. With every step, the dunes themselves seemed to breathe, emitting a low, humming tune as the wind swept across their crests. It was a haunting, beautiful sound, a lullaby sung by the landscape. Then came a soft, rushing sigh. She turned to see the dune behind her collapse in a gentle avalanche, smoothing over completely and erasing every one of her footprints. The way back was gone, swallowed by the shifting sands. A flutter of panic rose in her throat, but she closed her hand around the remaining warm dust in her pocket. She drew out a small handful and cast it forward. The particles did not scatter to the wind, but settled upon the sand, each one glowing with a steady, star-like light, forming a clear and unwavering trail ahead of her. The path held firm, yet on the wind now came a new sound, a lonely, echoing cry that seemed to call from a great distance. It was a sound of profound isolation, a feeling that resonated deep within her. As she listened, the mournful cry slowly resolved, weaving itself into a clear, plaintive melody that pulled her onward, its notes guiding her toward a dark silhouette on the horizon, an oasis of trees that shimmered like spun crystal. The crystal trees of the oasis chimed with every breath of wind, a sound like 1,000 tiny glass bells. Elara walked among them, their perfectly clear trunks and branches refracting the starlight into gentle rainbows that danced across the pale sand. At the heart of this grove lay a pool of water so still and dark. It was a perfect mirror for the heavens, a doorway of shimmering silver leading straight into the sky. She knelt at its edge, her own reflection lost among the brilliant pinpricks of light. Then, a tremor passed through the oasis. The water's surface shivered, and a sharp, clear ping echoed through the air. One of the crystal trees nearby had fractured, a thin crack running up its trunk, from which a slow, silvery sap began to weep. The tree's chime turned dissonant and pained, and the reflection in the pool began to blur, the stars swirling into meaningless smears of light. Without hesitation, Elara reached into her pocket, feeling the last grains of the warm, sleepy dust from the mountain. She pressed a single, glittering particle into the crack. The dust flared with a soft, golden warmth, fusing the crystal seamlessly back together. The silvery flow ceased, and the tree's chime returned, now a clear, grateful note that resonated through the entire grove. Instantly, the pool's surface stilled, becoming a flawless pane of glass once more, but the sky it reflected was no longer the one above. One constellation, a beautiful, intricate pattern of a soaring bird, was vivid in the water yet completely absent from the actual night sky. As Elara watched, the image of the missing constellation did not simply sit in the water. It detached itself, lifting from the surface as a construct of pure, shimmering starlight. It floated silently through the air, a ghost of a forgotten story, drifting directly toward a simple, ancient stone archway that stood alone at the oasis's edge, its opening filled with a soft, waiting darkness. The stone archway stood draped in ancient ivy, its opening a threshold of pure stillness. Elara stepped beneath its weathered curve, and for a single, suspended heartbeat, the world itself seemed to forget to breathe. The air grew thick and silent, the very light pausing in its dance. Then she was through, and the world rushed back in a dizzying torrent of color and sound. She stood in a meadow where time had come unraveled, Flowers of impossible vibrancy burst from the soil at her feet, their petals unfurling in a frantic blur of color, only to curl, brown, and dissolve into dust within the space of a single gasp. The sun raced across the sky, casting long, frantic shadows that spun like compass needles. A deep, personal disorientation washed over her. The memory of her grandmother's face flickered in her mind, its familiar lines softening into a blur before she could grasp them. The comforting hum of the Hall of Echoes grew faint and distant, a thread threatening to snap. She felt her own history beginning to thin, moments of her life pulled away by the rushing current. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. To be lost here was to be forgotten completely, her story scattered like the petals on the wind. She closed her eyes against the temporal storm, fighting to find a fixed point in the chaos. She reached not for a person or a place, but for a narrative. She focused on the story she was living right now, the steady, ongoing tale of the rekindled hearth, of the listening stone and the woven stars, of the guardian's riddle and the sleeping mountain. This was her anchor, a story still being written, its thread strong and continuous. She wrapped her consciousness around it, holding fast to its progression. As she did, the frenetic blooming and dying around her began to slow. The spinning shadows settled. The meadow stabilized, not into a fixed moment, but into a gentle, flowing stream of time. Where her feet were firmly planted, a single flower bloomed. Its petals were the color of moonlight on still water, and it did not wither. At its center, a perfect dewdrop clung, and within that tiny sphere of water, a scene played out. A moment of quiet laughter between two figures in a sun-dappled glade, a memory preserved when all others had faded. The flower inclined its head, and the dewdrop, heavy with its captured moment, rolled from the petal. It did not fall to the grass, but moved with purpose, tracing a silver path across the ground that led away from the meadow and toward the entrance of a quiet, cobbled street lined with sleeping cottages. The cobbled street was lined with sleeping cottages, and from each porch hung a lantern that glowed not with fire, but with the very color of a dream. A soft, buttery yellow light spilled from one, whispering of a quiet breakfast shared with an old friend. A brilliant, adventurous violet pulsed from another, telling of uncharted forests and hidden maps. These luminous dreams drifted from their lanterns like gentle, colored mist, filling the street with a quiet tapestry of sleeping hopes and stories. Elara walked slowly, the weight of her own gathered tales, a comforting presence in this place of slumbering imagination. Then she saw it. One lantern, tucked beside a humble doorway, flickered with a pale, sickly gray light. Its dream mist was thin, wispy, and evaporating before it could even form a proper shape, as if the person sleeping inside was slowly forgetting how to dream at all. A profound sadness touched her heart. Without a second thought, she cupped her hands around the cool glass and leaned close. She breathed out softly, not air, but a single, shimmering thread of the story she had gathered from the silver-leafed grove, the ballad of starlight on forgotten seas. The thread wove into the weak gray light, and the lantern flared, its color deepening into a steady, healthy blue. The dream mist thickened, coiling into the form of a small, wooden boat, sailing on a calm, moonlit lake, its journey now secure. From the corner of her eye, a patch of darkness detached itself from the eaves of the cottage. It was not a menacing shadow, but a silhouette shaped like a sleeping cat, its form stitched together from the very substance of dreams. It regarded her with a calm, knowing silence, then gestured with a soft, dark paw toward the end of the street, where a simple stone bridge arched over a river that flowed without a single sound. The bridge was woven from moonbeams, cool and shimmering under her touch. Elara walked its luminous path over the silent river, a wide ribbon of darkness that moved with a profound, soundless purpose. Peering over the delicate railing, she saw them. Drifting just below the surface were the reflections of tales that were never finished, their shapes like translucent leaves caught in the current. One showed a half-built tower against a twilight sky, another a song with a missing final verse. Then a particularly vivid image swirled into view, a reflection of two children, their hands almost touching as they laughed in a sunlit field, before the image faded into a heartbreaking blur of distance and silence. It was a story of a lost friendship, and its pull was a sharp, physical ache in her chest, tempting her to reach down and try to piece its broken pieces back together. Her fingers trembled with the urge, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that not every story could or should be mended. Some were meant to remain as they were, their incompleteness a part of their own quiet truth. With a soft sigh of her own, she drew the eternal flower from the meadow of time from her satchel. She held it for a moment, its petals glowing with captured moonlight, and then let it fall. It drifted down, a slow, gentle star, and landed upon the dark water. Where it touched, the river ignited. A soft, silver radiance spread from the point of contact, flowing outward in silent, shimmering rings. The unfinished tales seemed to sigh in collective gratitude, their faint images brightening, their forms becoming clearer and more whole for just a moment, as if finally acknowledged. The river's new light did not fade, but instead gathered and swirled beneath the moonbeam bridge, coalescing into a series of stepping stones that glowed with that same gentle silver, leading away from the water's edge and into the deep, waiting shadows of an ancient forest. The silver stepping stones led her into a forest where the trees were ancient and immense, their bark a tapestry of silver gray. A soft wind moved perpetually through the high branches, and with every gust, the trees released not a rustle, but a deep, resonant sigh. Each sigh was a distinct emotion given voice, a released regret for a path not taken, or a quiet hope for a reunion yet to come. They wove together into a chorus of whispered feelings that filled the air around her. This collective breath soon coalesced into a visible, gentle breeze that swirled at her feet, a soft, insistent pressure guiding her steps along a winding, mossy trail. She followed its lead, carried forward by the forest's own emotional current. Then she passed beneath the boughs of a great, weeping willow, and it released a sigh so heavy with sorrow, it felt like a physical weight settling upon her shoulders. The memory within it was one of a final, unspoken farewell, its grief so potent it threatened to root her to the spot, trapping her in its melancholy. For a moment, her own breath caught, the sadness feeling like a stone in her chest, but she knew she could not absorb it, only answer it. Closing her eyes, she drew a steadying breath and began to hum, weaving a simple, hopeful counter melody into the weave of the sigh. Her tune was light and persistent, a thread of gold in a gray tapestry. Slowly, the heavy sigh unraveled, its dense sorrow softening, its edges lifting until it was no longer an anchor, but a gentle zephyr that brushed her cheek with a feeling of quiet acceptance before drifting away. In response, the entire forest seemed to brighten, the silvery bark glowing with a warmer light. The leaves of every tree rustled in a harmonious whisper that felt like approval. The guiding breeze, however, did not continue on a single path. It parted, swirling in two separate directions, where the trail divided irrevocably into two. One path, dappled with warm, golden light, whispered of cozy hearths and tales of gentle comfort. The other, shimmering with a cool, silvery radiance, promised epic journeys and forgotten heroes. Each whispered its own compelling promise, and Elara knew her next step would determine which forgotten tale she was destined to hear. The two paths breathed their distinct promises into the quiet air, one warm as honeyed bread, the other cool as midnight dew. A profound stillness settled around Elara, the weight of the choice pressing upon her. To walk the golden path was to embrace a story of pure, uncomplicated joy, a tale that would warm the heart like a familiar blanket. The silver path whispered of a different comfort, the kind found in deep understanding and quiet acceptance of life's intricate patterns. Yet selecting one felt like a betrayal of the other, a silencing of a unique voice in the chorus she had sworn to rekindle. Her fingers closed around the smooth, warm hearthstone in her pocket, its steady pulse a reminder of her true purpose. She had not come to this forgotten realm to choose between stories, but to welcome them all. With a breath of quiet conviction, she did not choose. Instead, she placed one foot upon the golden radiance and the other upon the silvery gleam, her soul holding both intentions in perfect, hopeful balance. For a single, suspended moment, the two lights resisted, pushing against each other like opposing magnets. Then, with a soft, chiming sound that felt like the universe sighing in approval, they yielded. The paths flowed together under her feet, their lights intertwining to create a single walkway of shimmering, living starlight. From the ground, vines of gold and silver spiraled upward, weaving themselves into a beautiful archway overhead, their leaves whispering a harmonious melody that was both celebration and solace. This new, unified path led her forward, its gentle light illuminating a small, circular clearing where the air itself seemed to hold its breath in reverence. At its center, resting upon a simple patch of moss, stood a single, ancient chair, carved from the wood of 1,000 forgotten tales. The ancient chair felt warm and solid beneath her, its wood carved with the silent forms of mythic beasts. As Elara settled into its embrace, a torrent of memory surged into her mind. She saw the woven stars, felt the stone guardian's gaze, and heard the crystal trees chime, each story a brilliant thread vying for her attention. The sheer weight of them pressed down, a cacophony of images and emotions, and the sturdy chair groaned, a deep crack splintering its aged leg. It could not bear this chaotic burden. Panic flickered, but she pushed it aside, closing her eyes and reaching not for the story's grandeur, but for their quiet hearts. She sought the gentle comfort of the mountain's sleepy breath, the soft melancholy of the sighing forest, the simple hope in the mended lantern's dream. One by one, she wove these cozy essences together, her care a gentle loom. The violent splintering ceased. The chair steadied, its wood glowing with a soft, honeyed light, as the connected tales began to hum in a deep, resonant harmony. This gentle music did not stay in the clearing. It reached out, a visible thread of golden sound that stretched across the realms, finding and answering the low, melodic hum from the Hall of Echoes. The bridge of light it formed was a clear, silent call, beckoning her journey home. The bridge of light was a melody made solid beneath her feet, Each step resonated with the hum of the woven stars, the chime of the crystal trees, and the deep, sleepy breath of the mountain, their combined song a vibrant chord pulling her home. With every footfall, a shimmering fragment of a tale solidified within the bridge's structure, a memory of a mended lantern or a preserved dewdrop, weaving itself into the path and making it stronger, more real. But from the forgotten corners of the realms, thin shadows gathered at the edges of the light. They had no form or voice of their own, yet they whispered with the echoes of her own past doubts, murmuring that one voice was too small to carry such a weight, that some silences were meant to last. The bridge's brilliant edges began to fray, the light thinning under the onslaught of uncertainty. Elara felt a familiar coldness in her chest, but she closed her hand around the warm hearthstone in her pocket. She did not shout. Instead, she lifted her chin and spoke aloud the very first story that had come to her at the hearth, her voice clear and steady as she named the lost constellation and its vanished pattern of light. Her words, simple and true, became new threads of gold in the weaving. The bridge brightened instantly, its song swelling as the shadows recoiled from the certainty in her tone, melting back into the nothingness from which they came. The effort left her breathless, a deep weariness settling in her bones. The hall of echoes shimmered in the distance, its hearth fire a brilliant star that seemed both an arm's length and a world away, a paradox of proximity that tested her resolve. She focused only on the next step, and then the next, until at last the bridge of light deposited her gently before the ancient hearth, its flames now roaring with a vibrant, joyful light that banished the last of the hall's deep chill.